Welcome, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Denise Milburn, and I'm a facilitator and coach at CLE. Our learning today will focus on using questioning as a facilitator and coach to give and receive feedback that fosters transformative thinking and builds the learner presenter's capacity. To accomplish this, we will focus our efforts on understanding the questioning continuum, specifically clarifying, probing, and suggestion questions in order to strengthen our strategies and mindsets while fostering a culture of giving and receiving feedback. Using the continuum with carefully constructed questioning will also build the confidence of our colleagues to understand and recognize that they already have the capacity within themselves to solve even the thorniest of dilemmas. First, let's look at the visual representation of the continuum. This will help us understand the difference between clarifying, probing, and suggestion questions. In this diagram, you will notice that probing questions are in the center of the graphic, and that when constructed thoughtfully and offered to a colleague, can lead to transformative learning. Probing questions can help us draw out the presenter's thinking, the presenter's assumptions or beliefs, to help them think about a dilemma differently. They should not be designed as suggestions masked in a question, but rather should be broad enough to surface the presenter's own ideas and thoughts, thereby building the presenter's leadership capacity. On the diagram, you will also note that clarifying questions exist to get quick factual answers to a question and are the least probing, while suggestion questioning offers advice to the receiver to change conditions or structures. So now we will go into a little more detail about each of these types of questions and how they might be used to address a fictional focus growth question scenario. First, in order to successfully facilitate, we need to encourage the presenter to identify a dilemma that they're having and then frame that dilemma into a focus growth question. A dilemma is a problem that may be broad, provides context, and is a problem that needs to be addressed in order to move the work forward. An example of a dilemma you may hear could be, we provide a lot of embedded professional development to enhance student learning, yet our learning walks reveal minimal implementation in the classroom of the action steps and ideas presented during these sessions. So now we need to take this dilemma and turn it into a focus growth question. The purpose of the focus growth question is to help the presenter gain clarity and articulate the dilemma in a manner that would elicit the most helpful feedback. Reframing the dilemma as a question will also provide a focusing lens, not only for feedback for a dilemma or a conversation, but also during any observations or instructional rounds, for example. And the question should usually be centered on what the presenter can do. What can I do? How can I, what next steps can I take? So the question should usually ask, what steps can I take? So in this fictional scenario, a focus growth question could be, what are my next leadership moves to help the actions and ideas presented in focus common planning times be put into action? Or perhaps, what else might I do to help teachers feel empowered to take risks in creating classroom environments in which strategies presented in focus common planning times are utilized? How might you frame the focusing question using this dilemma? Now that the presenter identified a dilemma, and we have helped to distill that dilemma into a focus growth question, we can begin to utilize the question continuum to expand the thinking and construct the questions that will yield the most powerful learning or aha moments for the presenter. First, let's take a look at clarifying questions. Clarifying questions are for the participants to enhance their own understanding, not the presenters. They're questions of facts and often elicit yes or no or simple answers. Clarifying questions do not provide any new food for thought for the presenter. The litmus test for a clarifying question is, does the presenter have to think before answering? If so, then your question is not a clarifying question. Using the same scenario provided, some clarifying questions could be, how often do teachers meet for common planning time? Who decides the agenda topics for common planning time? And are the ideas or practices discussed in common planning time focused on one concept or many concepts? Do you need some additional context? What clarifying questions would you ask? So now that we as facilitators and coaches have had an opportunity to get context around the dilemma and have been provided through the asking of clarifying questions, the nuts and bolts of the dilemma, we can start to ask probing questions and provide useful feedback. Probing questions are intended to help the presenter think more deeply about the issue at hand and build their own leadership capacity to move themselves and others toward transformative work. Probing questions are for the express purpose of helping the presenter to grow and are not designed to satiate the facilitator's curiosity. A good probing question encourages the presenter to think deeply, uncover assumptions, and encourage new perspectives. If it is a genuine probing question, they should not have a ready answer. A good probing question allows for multiple responses, avoids yes-no responses, empowers the person being asked the question to solve the problem or manage the dilemma, rather than deferring to someone else to provide the solution who may have greater or different expertise. Probing questions stimulate reflective thinking by moving from reaction to reflection. They challenge assumptions, they channel inquiry, promise insight. They create a paradigm shift, and a good probing question may even evoke more questions. A good probing question is concise and prompts a slow response. All of this leads to touching upon a deeper meaning. One hint: check to see if you have a right answer in mind or are presenting your own agenda. If you do, delete the judgment from it or don't ask it. Probing questions are not meant to be a suggestion with a question mark. A suggestion disguised as a question is more focused on giving advice. The facilitator coach then becomes the expert versus developing the expertise of the presenter. And these types of questions may work in the short term, but will not build capacity in the long term. We all want to help each other and provide suggestions and solutions. It's a natural tendency. But before doing this, we should ask, is this line of questioning or suggestion questioning the most helpful feedback to lead to deep and transformational learning? Will it build the presenter's capacity to problem solve? So now let's look at non-examples of probing questions versus probing questions. For example, could you have the students use a rubric to assess their work? That is a recommendation or suggestion restated as a question. What would happen if students assess the quality of work themselves? Again, a recommendation restated as a question. A better, more probing question might be, why should students be invested in doing quality work? Or, what would have to change in order for students to demonstrate investment in their work? What probing questions would you ask? So, now that we understand the architecture of a probing question, here are some examples of stems that you could use in any scenario. For example, Why do you think this is the case? What would have to change in order for? What is another way you might? If you were that person, how might you see this situation? What is the best thing that could happen? What evidence exists? And what if the opposite were true? And here are more question stems. Now, back to our scenario regarding the presenter's desire to have the teachers translate the ideas presented in focused common planning time into action in the classroom. The facilitator could help the presenter think about the problem by asking the following probing questions. If you were one of the teachers in this scenario, how would you see this situation? What would you have to change in order for the teachers to implement the ideas presented in common planning time? What do you need to ask to better understand why the teachers are not implementing the learning from common planning time? What additional or other probing questions would you ask to help build the presenter's capacity and lead them toward transformational learning? In closing, when looking to help someone solve a dilemma, it is important for the facilitator to build capacity in the leader by forming questions that can help the presenter deeply think about the dilemma and focus question. The question continuum is an excellent framework to help you as the facilitator and coach discern between clarifying, probing, and suggestion questioning as you construct your facilitating coaching questions to suit the needs of the presenter. For additional information on the question continuum, please visit CLE.org. Thanks for watching.